Hello and welcome to our third episode of the 4 episodes that I'm doing on preparing for recovery out of the pandemic. I'm Nick Jarrett-Kerr and I'm a member of global consultancy Edge International, and for the last 18 years I've been helping law firms across the world in their strategies and their business critical issues. Prior to that I was a managing partner of a UK law firm. And in this episode today we're going to be talking about how we can look at practice group planning. But just a reminder of what we heard in the second of the episodes, because it's important to remember those, that all that we do at a practice group has to be client related, and how we interface with clients is vital. And in the last episode we talked about client contact in an era of social distancing, some positives and negatives, how nevertheless we can build and develop and renew trust and confidence even when we're not seeing our clients, and using the 4 qualities of legal work, service, accomplishment and relationships to do that, as well as leveraging the opportunities for cost effectiveness and good legal project management, and how to communicate with their empathy. Most importantly, from the point of view of the current episode, how we can learn from clients more about their business affairs, more about their personal affairs if we're private client lawyers, that will help us to plan better for the future. So in this episode we're looking at the whole question of reviewing our practice areas for opportunities and threats. Now I've worked with lots of law firms across the world at practice group level as well as at firm level. And there are some firms, of course, that are not big enough to define individual departments or practice groups. And in those firms, I've helped them at the firm level alone. And the same lessons that we're going to talk about now apply for firms as well as practice areas within firms. And we're going to look at how I typically review practice areas with firms in order to assist them to build a plan for the future. And we're going to be looking also at the question of whether or not our staff are always got the best specializations and the best capability and capacity to deal with clients for the work that they want us to do. And that sometimes needs us to rearrange our staff in order to achieve that. Hopefully not by a redundancy program, but by helping them build skills in different areas. So my overall theme for this episode is that it is vital to start to adjust the business model for our practice to reflect the new reality. Commoditized practices need to build further on technology. Advisory practices need to get to grips with more remote working. We need to identify practices that are going to flourish over the next period of time, as well as those that are going to fade. At the same time, in all our groups, in all our firms, we need to reduce where we can operating costs, and we need to try to improve productivity. Some years ago, I wrote a book on dealing with underperformance in partnerships, and that's now in its 2nd edition, which came out 18 months or so ago. And what I discovered there is the issue of underperforming partners and senior staff is always with us. And it's important to have a process to deal with that so that we're not just knee-jerking into getting rid of people. But at this time of pandemic, firms cannot afford to carry passengers. People have to shape up, or else they're in danger of being shipped out. And how we deal with underperformance, which we don't really have time to look at in this series, I invite you to buy my book and read it, is critical for how we can cope with the future. We also need to decide which clients to support through the recession. There's no doubt about it that clients rely on law firms to some extent as their bankers. That's expressed in how long it takes them to pay up their bills. And some clients, sadly, are taking longer and may leave us with bills if they go into administration that are never going to be paid. And we need to be careful to look at the warning signs there. And we need to determine our recruitment and retention plans, certainly in the short term, as we face an uncertain future. So the first area to look at in this podcast is the research and understanding our practice groups to look at the best opportunities and how to cope with the worst threats. I mentioned that in the previous episode I stressed the need to get close to clients and to talk to them wherever possible. We do need to understand the current and likely needs of our typical client types, of the sectors in which we're involved in, and even the different regions and localities where our offices are based or where our operations face. Now for this, we can harness our solicitors, juniors, associates to carry out desk-based research and analysis as what's going on in this industry or that, in this area or that. Client interviews are very important here, not just in trying to sell them services, but in trying to find out what's going on in their business, in their family. And we need to identify all the stronger ties that we might have within client types and industries. Do we have a list of the kind of clients that we serve and with what frequency in key areas? And can we develop further on that as in view of what's going on at the moment? And then we need to look at areas of possible work. I've often talked about the S-curve of demand, where a service emerges for the first time. It grows or dies, but sometimes it will grow and be of increasing interest, and then it will mature before it sometimes fades away. And we need to look at a way of looking at our work and working out what are the trends that are emerging, what are the things that are going to grow over the next few months and years, and by the way, what are the areas that are sadly going to fade away because of the current crisis. So the second or the third area that we need to look at in terms of reviewing our practice group is to make a frank assessment of our capabilities, our competencies, our skills, not to try to believe that we can do all things for all men, but to identify our areas of key strengths and vulnerabilities, to rate them, if we can, in comparison with our competitors, to look at skills that somehow we don't tend to use that are going out of fashion or are superfluous. And finally, fourthly, we need to look at our market and competitor analysis, how our rivals are positioned in relation to us, what sort of clients they've got, how their pricing operates, what their business models are, and what their reputation is, what their resources and capabilities are, the size of their departments, their skills, the processes that they're using, are they better or worse than ours, including their use of IT? And what might their strategic, financial and market goals be? Now, I've said that all in about a minute. The whole market and competitor analysis is something that can typically take several hours or several days to do properly. But it's important to know what's going on in our industry, not to fool ourselves. This will enable us to realize areas in which we are falling short, as well as areas of opportunities where our rivals are falling short, and that we can take advantage of that. And then we need to look at how we can best use our staff for the current and future situation. It's critical to be able to pivot to new ways of working, to deploy new skills. And what a lot of people are finding in this current pandemic is that it is possible to convert skills quickly, to build new skills. It's best used for sequential specializations. It's not easy for a transactional lawyer to become a litigator overnight, although there are some notable practitioners who managed to accomplish both disciplines. It's not easy for a private lawyer, client lawyer, suddenly to become a commercial lawyer. It's much better to be able to say, as was in the previous recessions, where mergers and acquisition lawyers, for instance, turn to insolvency work, to use the current specialization that you have to help you to move into another one. If you understand the mergers and acquisition market, you understand firms' capital demands and so on, it's much easier to work in an insolvency environment. That's just one example. Now, I can't really tell you what sequential specialization may be best for you, but just as an example that occurs to me off the top of my head, we've learnt that road traffic accidents have become much less in the last 2 months because people aren't travelling. How can we best use the skills of our road traffic accident lawyers for other types of accident and personal injury? And in helping to do that, we can devise systems, guides, checklists, frequently asked questions that can be referenced based upon their job function within the firm. And we can harness our best practitioners to teach others in the firm with on-the-job support so that they can learn quickly. This would enable us, if necessary, to mount a fighting force to help certain clients, a fighting force of people who may not have been involved in that sort of work always before, but will enable them to help a particular client issue. And then there's the question of what we do with staff who are unproductive at the moment because they just don't have enough work to do. And of course, we mustn't forget that good lawyers are always hard to find, and therefore to get rid of lawyers and then regret it years later may be something to avoid. We should of course consider furloughing and unpaid sabbaticals where redeployment is too costly in the short term. And finally, there is of course the option to think about redundancy, although it's important to try to resist stripping out the bottom layer of professionals. What we found in previous recessions is that it's very easy to take out the newest and cheapest and to leave the partner there alone. And what that resulted with was firms that were heavily over-partnered. And it's important, therefore, to try to gain a balance and retain the balance of leverage in your firm or even improve it. So practice group plans. And I think there are a number of things that we can do at present. And obviously, one of the key imperatives will be to plan to build or rebuild revenues and profits speedily and without having to invest too much expense in helping to do that. So here may be a question of trying to build market share by accelerated business development and client origination activities, exploiting our existing networks to get more of the available work, increasing contact with clients and referrers. Mobilizing associates is particularly important, particularly because they can talk to, albeit remotely distanced or on the phone, they can talk to people of their own age, their own level of seniority. And equally, we also ought to be looking at ways, always looking at ways of streamlining work and our cost base where this can be done quickly. It's important to build this into the plan. The plan also needs to have some very strong definitions in it, or strong descriptions that are measurable. We need to know the tactics and activities that the department or the practice group or the firm is going to engage itself in order to attain its revised goals. This will break down into tasks. Who does what? And when are they going to do it? And what are the resources that are going to be needed? Do we need assistance from elsewhere in the firm? And how can that assistance be obtained? And I'm sure you have heard before many, many times how important it is to measure as well as manage by having key metrics that will help you, key performance indicators, success measures, how long things are going to take, what the milestones are, how we're going to tell that we've been successful. In all this has got to be a plan for which people are responsible and are made accountable. Every activity needs to have a name against it. X is going to do this, Y is going to do that, by when. And this accountability and responsibilities, I've always thought, needs to be buttressed by having individual partner business plans, where partners commit to what they're going to do over the next period of time. Now, they may have done a business plan 6 months ago, a year ago, but I think we should be encouraging our partners at this time to say, right, what are we going to do now? What are you going to do now? Let's start again. Let's have a new period, a new plan for how you're going to cope with this. And all this should result, hopefully, in the longer term building of better skills to enable better specialization, better experience, or a more coherent offering to our clients. And then finally, all this needs to be boiled down into the usual list of measurable objectives, revised budgets, and so on. It's important that the group's action plan should be reinvigorated at this time. So just to summarize, we're looking at the opportunities to develop and rebuild. We're looking at this through research and analysis of where new services are likely to emerge or grow, where things are in danger, where things may be on the S-curve of demand. We're looking at our capabilities and our resources to cope with either a downturn or an upturn in work, depending on what happens. We're looking where we might have capability gaps, resource gaps. We're looking how we might marshal our staff, convert skills, enhance skills, find ways of holding on to staff in order to meet the current situation. And we are, of course, also looking ultimately, sadly, at maybe right-sizing the department to a different shape. And this will all hopefully build into an action plan that recovers our or grows our revenue and our profit in a relatively short period of time, with action points that are measurable and firm and sustainable and executable. So that's our second episode. Please do look at the Edge website for more resources on all these points. If there's anything that I have missed or you want to take issue with or ask me about further, please don't hesitate to contact me, and my email address is on screen for you to look at. So that's the third of these 4 20-minute episodes, and the final one is how we bring this all together in a firm plan for planning for recovery. And we'll look at that in some detail of some of the bold strategies that we can look at to enhance and protect our future. Thank you very much for listening.